Hey, welcome to our session, Game Change Approach. We're going to introduce a new concept, at least new to the public sector. It's called gamification. We were a little hesitant to use that term on the front end. We got a little pushback from some people. It's like, well, we don't really want to play games here. So anyway, we're going to play with this term. We're going to play with this concept. One of the things that Melissa and I decided when we put this presentation together is not to sort of play it safe. We're at a conference that's looking at innovation, looking to stretch your thinking a bit, maybe challenge you. So kind of hang on. There'll be times when you may feel challenged. There may be times where you think, okay, I already understand that. But the idea is to put it together on the back end. Hopefully you leave here with something a little different, a different way to think about how to go about this idea or this notion called gamification. We also have 6 or 7 examples in here of state and local agencies within California and outside of California. So we're going to talk about real-world examples too. This is not just textbook or professorial. So it's a real deal. We look forward to giving you this presentation. My name is Jeff Hoye. I'm in the Org Strat unit at CPS and sit on our senior leadership team. This is Melissa Asher. Melissa is in our Emerging Leaders program. She also runs our training and development program. So with that, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, so we're going to take you on a real-life journey today to discover, what is this term, what is this notion, gamification? How can I level up at my agency, right? We all want to level up, right? Yeah, this is a good thing. So, and why should I even care about this? And maybe even more importantly, how can I get other people to care about this, right? Because sometimes that's the hardest part. How does it work? We don't have hours to spend with you, which we would love if we did, but we're going to do the best that we can to give you some of the thoughts and some of the ways that this can actually work for you in your department or agency. And lastly, because we all want to know, well, does this actually work anywhere else, right? Does it? I don't know. Yeah, it actually does. Jeff already kind of gave it away. We've got 5 or 6 examples that we're going to share with you of how this has actually worked in other agencies and other departments. But we can't really go anywhere until we get some audience participation, right? Because this is after lunch, okay? Right? So our first question is really about, I'm going to pass Jeff here, this notion of games, right? So when you think about games in the public sector, what does that bring to mind for you, either positively or negatively? And just call it out.
Right in the back, just shout it out.
Bringing all the millennials into your fold.
Bringing in the millennials. They like games. Yeah, good, good. Bringing in the millennials. What else? What else do we have?
Problem solving, puzzling out problems.
Problem solving, puzzles, solving problems. Ooh, I like this. Is good. Teamwork. Did I hear teamwork? What else? Over here. Prize. Yes. Sometimes that's called badges.
Right there.
I was going to say sense of accomplishment.
Sense of accomplishment. Excellent. Strategies, competition.
In the back there in the red? No?
Competition, yeah, that competition sometimes we got to be a little careful with that one, right? Some of our overachievers, right, might kind of run someone over, but competition is very important concept for gamifying solutions. Fun! Yay! I have a prize for you, Jeff.
What you get?
The game ball. I have a magic game ball for you.
Wow. Wow.
This can be used in so many ways at your agency. I'm not kidding you. What you can do with this to bring a little bit of fun into your department and into your group is invaluable. So thank you.
Now everyone's
I wonder if I have other prizes. Okay, a couple of other answers and then we'll move on. Winning and successes. Great, great. Well, I have to tell you, this group has done an outstanding job of giving us very positive feedback about this topic. So that makes me think like we're in the right place at the right time. Let's test that. Do you recognize this?
Wait, can I ask the question differently? Those of you in my generation, boomers, raise your hand. How many of you know what this is? Yeah, you do. Okay.
Good.
I'm impressed.
All right, so, we're not playing this in the workplace, I'm sure, right? That doesn't happen. Maybe our staff occasionally, or Clash of Clans, or Words with Friends, or any number of these types of games. But what is really undeniable in today's world is that games are very prevalent in our lives. And not only these types of games. I think we're all probably involved in games that are less obvious, but are equally prevalent in our lives. Who has Southwest rewards points? Yeah. How about Hilton, Marriott? Okay. Who can't wait for that Rayleigh's reward points, dollars? Are you with me? Yeah, even eBay, right? Who's got status on eBay? Right? All of these things are games that we play, that we're engaged in our lives.
So what's the point? What's going on? Why? Let's look at the organizations that Melissa just asked us about and we're playing. What's going on? What are they trying to do? They're trying to shape our behavior, and it works, right? And in this gamification or the game design that we bring to organizations in which we're engaging groups to improve outcomes, that's one of the key drivers behind this is, can we engage staff and modify behavior as needed? And so this idea of tapping into the game theory or game design, because it doesn't matter if we're playing the Southwest game or if we're playing, my wife is huge in Candy Crush, and she's up at so many levels, and she and her daughter have this big competition. It's very achievement oriented, and it is that competitive, but it's that sort of social, healthy competition. And so one of the things that we're putting forth today is this idea of how can we bring that same sort of fun, engaging mentality to our team-based improvement efforts in organizations.
Before we leave this topic, though, this slide is for Jeff.
Okay, now, different question. Millennials, raise your hand. Any millennials here? Okay, do you know what this is? You do? And you're a millennial back there? Okay. This was such a hot game back in my day. It's Pong. This is such a great game. We've kind of come a long way, but there was a time when people like me would spend a lot of time in front of the TV playing this dumb thing. Here's kind of the sobering thought we'd like to leave you with. To a lot of our millennials, this is what our game looks like to them when they come into the public sector. They've been playing Candy Crush and World of Warcraft, and we say, great, come on in. And by the way, who wants to play Pong? And they, I made the wrong decision kind of thing. So just a little visual for you. Think about as we're going through the presentation.
Well, and I guess our point here really is that gaming has been around for a long time, starting with something as simplistic as this, and has really rapidly grown and proliferated with the rise of social media and technologies, right? I mean, we have these devices in our hands, we can play them on our smartphones. Social media has opened up whole new avenues for us to be able to apply these types of concepts. In training and development, of course, we use gaming in training all of the time to get people to retain the information, to get them to engage in it, get them to use it. So these concepts are not new, but what's kind of cool is collectively, if you look at the community that plays World of Warcraft, they have collectively spent 6 million years, if you put it all together, trying to get that purple sword. Right? I mean, so think about the enormity of that, the enormous amount of time and energy that people will put in to achieve something. And in that case, it's something imaginary, right? And there's books written on this topic now. These two books, and you know a phenomenon has hit when there's a dummies book on it, right? This is a real deal here. That was from 2013. Gamified by the Gartner Group is 2014. So this concept has really solidified even in the literature and has become much more formalized. Private industry has gone bananas with this, and I mentioned badges, and point systems. I mean, X Game, Fitbit, Nike Plus. I mean, all of these different agencies, all these different companies are using these concepts to drive behavior. And so why not in the public sector?
Can I hit that one?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, here's the first challenge. We said we'd challenge you. I want you to picture your staff as engaged as this member is with their Xbox or Call of Character Woods. When we go into work in organizations, a lot of times, and I'm going to generalize, I'm not saying it's anyone in this room that would say that, but we find leadership's a hard time accepting the fact that their staff, who will give them 8 to 5, will not give them 8 to 5, plus get into this type of work. We're going to tackle big agency issues and come up with solutions, make our presentations to management, secure buy-off, and then go ahead and operationalize the improvement. So if that's you, and maybe there's just one of you, or it's all of us, that's one of the elements in gamification, is that we found in working with staff, if given the opportunity to address some of the craziness in their world in order for them to help us improve the performance metrics, they'll find a way to get the work done by 4 o'clock, and they'll give us an hour if there's something in it for them. So. And we're going to get into this in a little bit and a little bit further, but this is something that we need to learn how to do as leaders, and we need to learn how to do as staff within our 8 to 5. So we're taking care of business, and at the same time, we're looking to make the necessary improvements going forward. First concept I want to just lay out with you is this idea of workflow, and I'll be referring to that, and we've got some visuals, but this is how the teams are looking at our organizations in a game design improvement effort. And it's a pretty simple concept. Work is coming in the door. Obviously, in an ideal world, our processes and procedures are set up such that it then flows out the door and the customer's getting what they want on time, within quality, and we're able to, as leaders, keep within our particular budget. First example I want to give you, and we've got different examples. Some are back office, some are more manufacturing or operational oriented, because we're not just all pushing paper in the public sector. And this first one is what happens when you're working with limits or limitations. And it's a classic model. I'll give you a second. These are hard to read. It's kind of like reading a X-ray. Once you sort of figure out the pattern on these, you'll be able to zoom in quickly. But here it's a classic scenario where you've got work coming in the door freely, but then it's being pinched off. And so if you're familiar with the theory of constraints and that idea of knowing where the bottlenecks are, typically when we work with teams, they know this. This is like, yeah, that's exactly how the work flows, but we don't see it up in management. All we do is hear them complaining sometimes. And so this is one way to help the decision makers understand what's going on in our organizations. The upshot of the work that this particular group did, they came up with 2 solutions. And by the way, in game design, the teams are challenged to come up with a solution that can be implemented within 6 months, and the challenge is not to use any additional resource money. What tends to happen if you don't have that particular constraint, you're going to get solutions from your teams that are like, yeah, we need to go out and buy a software program, or we need to go out and spend money, and then we know by the time we get our our contracting and our money and our resources and purchase and whatnot, we've just lost another 6 to 8 months. And so the teams are challenged accordingly. What this particular team came up was two things. One, it's the turnaround once they got to go through these funnels, and this could be a paper flow process too. The challenge is the turnaround time, you got to double it. So if you've cut down your workflow by half, you've got to double it. The other solution they came up with is it's got to be scheduled properly, and the employees, the staff, those working in the pipeline, and I don't know who to attribute this to, this is one of our speakers. We need to work with the people in the pipeline where the workflow is streaming. That's their challenge, but they know what to do there, and so it's kind of like air traffic control, and we need to just better schedule the work coming through that pipe. Next example, it's kind of a classic application development situation. And here, it's a classic, it's called waterfall, and those of you in IT and application development are familiar with this. And in this particular example, what's happening is there's an idea upstairs somewhere, someone in marketing has an idea, and then from there the idea flows to sales, and they're going to put it out, and then from there it's going to flow to engineering, and they design it, and then operations is going to actually create the product or service, and it goes out the door. What you usually have in a waterfall situation like that is the bottom flow, in this case operations, they pay for all the sins of the upflow group. So the upflow group that went over their time, or they didn't quite get it done, but they pushed it out the door. By the time we push things through that way, again, the end of the pipeline here is going to pay for the sins. What was happening in this scenario was the group at the bottom, they were normally getting 90 days to take care of their part of this particular product. When we came in and we looked at it, they were only getting 60 days worth of work. And so we asked the team to sort of dig in and take a look at that. And what they found was, and this is the insidious part of processes and systems, and I think some of you recognize this, they had created a little tributary, and it was called aftercare. And it sounded nice, and we kept hearing about the aftercare program, and so we as a team, we ignored it. And then finally someone on the team said, and it's usually, by the way, that's just why cross-functional teams and folks that sometimes don't know the process, they get to ask the innocent. They think it's a dumb question, it's a great question. Someone asked, what is aftercare? And they said, oh, aftercare is all that stuff we don't get to, but we've got to deal with it and we've got to account for it, so we put it in aftercare. And so what you end up doing here is you're normalizing a suboptimal process, or you are making nice with your firefighting. And so what this organization had done is, everyone else got 90 days, this group got 60 days, and they were caught in a cycle, and they were never going to get out of this. And so the upshot, what the team came up with here is two things. And these solutions are going to sound simple to you, but they're huge. And usually it's the simple solutions that we're looking for. It's back to that, you got 6 months to figure it out, and you're not going to get any money. It forces people to come up with simple ideas, and they're usually the best. The simple idea here was, in this case, operations needed to be at the planning table with marketing, as did all of the other three with marketing. And then when we discuss the problem and the solution, ops has an opportunity to say, that might not work, or this is what it needs to look like when it comes to me. If not, we're not going to accept it. So that did two things. One is ops knew what was coming versus it just gets dumped on them. And second, they were able to have a voice on the front end as well. Again, you might think, well, that wasn't such a big deal. It was huge, and it made all the difference in the world. Next situation, this is a state of California agency. This is kind of a classic scenario. I think you're going to recognize this. In a typical, and let's just orient to the chart here, on a typical flow like this, on the left side, we've got requests for service coming in. And when I say typical, let me switch. In an ideal situation, we've got requests for orders coming in. We've got standardized processes and procedures. Our clients all follow the process and procedure. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. And when they do that, for the most part, as long as our processes and procedures are also standardized and work well, then we tend to come out of, we'll call it chute number one there. Our outcome, our outputs tend to be on time and on budget. However, in this particular situation, what we were finding is actually the picture started changing when we got down in the data. So the first picture that I gave you was the picture of sort of the 2B. This is what it should look like, and if we were looking at a manual and look at the processes, procedures, this is what it would look like. However, once we started looking at it, the team came back and said, actually, and those little black arrows on the left, you see the clients aren't coming through the normal channels that we had all agreed they would come through. So this would represent that phone call that you get, hey, would you mind just kind of putting this one in the front of the board, or hey, I didn't quite have all the information, I'll send it to you next week, but could you start this? So you start to see those particular symptoms, and then on the right you start to see a degrade in the performance. So now we're starting to see that not everything's going out on time and on budget, but we're starting to slow up, and we're also having to start to say no, which is not what we want to do. Then what happens is, and this is, it got to this point, is our clients now are frustrated. Our clients think that we're the problem. And so now we escalate and we go to the corner office and we start screaming. And then the corner office comes down to us and says, hey, we got a problem and you need to fix this kind of thing. And so what we ended up doing now is it's not near chaos, but that's what it feels like. In this particular agency, some of the effects and the symptoms, and it shouldn't surprise you, the average tenure staff here was 2 years or less. People could not wait to get out of there. Staff was just as frustrated and upset with this process as were the customers, and that's a key. And I want you to remember that when we come back to a staff that we're only getting 8 to 5. How do we get a staff that's frustrated to want to engage and improve this situation? Here's another example from the state of Iowa. They affectionately looked at this as the hijacked permit process. And in a typical permit process, the requesting, and in this case it was air quality permit, but this is all permit processes. In this case, it was state corporations, state entities, state corporations, private sector corporations were either requesting this air quality permit, or they were having some of their suppliers, please come to Iowa, set up shop, bring your jobs, bring your money, and oh, by the way, you got to get the air quality permit. No problem, every state has that. The problem, though, is it was taking 18 months to get this air quality permit, and private organizations don't wait around for 18 months to find out if they can affect their plan. They'll go somewhere else. So once the team got into it to try to figure out what was going on, and these are their words, the process had been hijacked by the intermediary. And the intermediary, the professional intermediary, in this case were the attorneys, and just so you know, the consultants as well. Once they tried to understand that, because the state officials were confused, why would you need to go to an attorney or a consulting company? Just follow the process. But when we did a consumption process map there, the team rather did a consumption map process there and looked at what it took to consume the product. In this case, it was the permit. What they found was, oh my God, you do need an attorney, and you do need, and so what was happening is all the time and dollars were getting sucked out of this process by the professional intermediaries. The team was able to, the upshot, the team was able to come up with a 90 to 120-day solution, which is huge, and which meant a lot in terms of the economy and being able to attract others to the state of Iowa and those within the state as well. All of these solutions, these are not consulting solutions. These are not management solutions. These are teams of people working in the pipeline coming together with all the data they need and the challenge around what can we do to figure out how to get this done. Alyssa, you want to?
Yeah, because what we wanted to do, in addition to giving you some of these real-life examples without naming any names, is kind of distill this down for you and give you a model. Because basically what you're trying to do when you're trying to design a game around a process is one of three things. You're trying to change behavior, you're trying to develop skills, or you're trying to drive innovation, right? Those are probably three of the key things that you're going to be interested in doing. And when looking at those goals, you're going to be looking at some key stakeholders. One of those groups is going to be your customers. The probably equally important group is going to be your employees. And then you might also have a community that you're outreaching to. Local government, that probably figures really high in their world for reaching out. So this gives you kind of a framework to think about who are you trying to impact with this game that you want to design, and what are you trying to drive in that design. And so we took some of the things that happened out of that Iowa example. So for the customers, in this case the customers were the businesses, right? The state wanted these businesses to come in to the state. So they were trying to change the behavior by having these folks actually move to Iowa. But to make that happen, we had to impact the employee group, because we had to streamline that permitting process. That was ridiculous, the amount of time that was taking. And make no mistakes, the employees didn't enjoy that particular process either. We had to do that, though. The trick was in maintaining standards, because there were the scientists, there were the air quality folks. We can't just fold on our standards, right? We have a process because these things need to be in place. So we had to serve both of those customers. And there might be multiple customers that you're serving. And ultimately for the community, in this example, they all win if there are more jobs being brought into the community. So I won't belabor all of it. One of the other things that's kind of interesting with the development of the skills in that example is the employees needed to develop this collaboration skill set to be able to work together to design this game. But the other part was the motivation. This notion of the science of motivation, because the managers, the leaders in that organization had to drive that. They had to create this environment where the employees would get motivated around this. And that's a really important concept when it comes to game design. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So that's just to give you a framework, right? Kind of wrap your head around this a little bit. So hopefully you are getting your head wrapped around this, and hopefully this is not you. I don't see any faces like this out there.
There's one in the back. There's one in the back.
Where? Do we need to bring more prizes out?
Give them time. Give them time.
So what can we do to sell this basically to others? Yeah, and maybe to yourself if you're not 100% convinced. I mean, one of the things, and Jeff mentioned it earlier, is keeping this simple. We have to keep this concept simple, because really you're impacting kind of two groups here when we're talking about how are we going to apply this within our worlds. You want to please the customer, whomever that is. That's job one. But in order to please the customer, you have to make sure that you're giving the employees what they need to do that. And in this case, for a gamified solution, that often comes in the form of empowerment. Those two things have to come together. You can't please the customer and make your employees miserable, right? If you say, okay, now we've got all this new work to do, but no more resources. Where have we heard that before, right? I mean, that's kind of the world we live in. So we have to get the employees really engaged in this process, because they're going to have to bring that extra motivation, that extra effort into helping craft the solution.
So it's this intersection that we've got to figure out. When you go back, if some of you go back and say, hey, let's have a staff meeting, I want to tell you about something really cool. We're going to gamify our organization here, and this is really exciting. So what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you to improve some of these big problems we got. Are there any questions? This is the look you're going to get. It's like, so you want me to do more work with same resources, same pay, great. It's going to be crickets. So, but this is the challenge, and we want to show you now how you have to bridge this. And when you do bridge this, and you can, this is where staff get engaged to the point that they're going to be coming up with solutions like you heard earlier. They can do this in your organization as well. There's an intersection. If I were to go in, if Melissa and I were to go into your organization today, and you said, here's the workflow that's driving me crazy, if you look at my performance metrics, this is where I got a big problem. If we went out then and assessed and talked to your customer base, and that could be an internal customer or an external customer, we're going to get a laundry list of problems. And then if we were to group those and Pareto them, we would say, okay, we understand what works and what doesn't with your customer base. Then if we went to the second group, your staff, and we said, okay, you work within this particular workflow. The director has told us this is a big problem. You got any problems in this particular workflow? We're going to get a ton there, we're going to get a ton of information there in terms of what works and what doesn't. And if we were to take the what doesn't and Pareto it by theme, we're going to probably have a match, and you pick your number. I don't want to argue with you, but it's going to be anywhere from 50 to 75%. This particular slide doesn't show that magnitude, but we put it in softer so that we don't have you shaking your head and doubting it. But I'm just telling you from experience, there's a large agreement there. So what we do is when we go out to our staff, when we go out to organizations to present this, we're not coming out and saying, hey, we'd like you to solve these problems. You got to figure out how to get your other work done and blah, blah, blah. But rather, hey, we need to give you what you need. We need to take the craziness away from your day-to-day within this particular work stream, knowing that if we address that, that will address the client issue, and then we will get what we want. So this is the what's in it for me. This is one of your challenges, and it's not a difficult challenge once you just do the homework and find the Venn diagram and find the match there.
This is another slide that's probably familiar to many of you, and don't worry, we can't read it either, right? So this tool is commonly used in many organizations, and it's not a bad tool. This tool is used in most gamified types of solutions as well. But how engaging or compelling is that, right? I mean, and how often have we heard about or maybe even experienced where our scorecards, they're all green all the time, right? Or they're red and orange, and everybody's ducking for cover.
Yeah, for me, I would be looking at the red, and is that my name up there? And then I'd be doing a whole, oh my God, I have got to come up with a defense here because I don't want to get in trouble.
It was Jeff's fault,
well,
for sure.
Probably.
You know, he's in big trouble. He's going to be called to that corner office, right? So this tool is not a bad tool, though, because what we want to do is kind of get a culture shift, kind of get a shift in thinking around this particular tool and tap into what some of you said earlier, someone I think over here, about problem solving and being curious, right? So what we want to do if there's a red or an orange is unpackage that. And we want someone to come at it from the direction of, wow, it's a red. What can we do about that? Let's go talk with that group. Let's go talk with those people who are working on this and find out what we can do to move that in a better direction, right? It shifts that whole thinking to problem solving and being curious about how we can improve and what we can do differently and how can we do that in a team type of environment rather than just looking for the person who's responsible and trying to place blame. I mean, ultimately what we're getting at with this whole concept is the science of motivation and achievement. And again, this very smart group here today, many of the things that you mentioned early on are things that are absolutely critical elements for this. Fun, right? I mean, that's not a word we often associate with work, but is absolutely a critical element. And in one of our award nominees today used a very interesting term. Oh my gosh, this place is keeping me, but it was the faux go. Right? What a fun word for a pilot. Right? A faux go, right? And so you can make things fun in the workplace just by renaming things. I was reading about the Nike Plus preparing for this, and in the Nike Plus app you earn Nike Fuel. That's just points. But how much more fun is it to call it Nike Fuel, right? It's an alternate word, right? I mean, you can have a lot of fun with this type of thing with your teams and get them engaged with naming the project something clever or having some sort of special little team handshake, or there's lots of different ways to inject a little bit of fun into our work. Stress release, right? We've talked about how, we're not going to get extra resources. We need to get people to go that extra mile. So by getting them jazzed up about something, about a project, that's going to provide them some stress release, and you're going to get a little more productivity, a little bit more engagement out of that person. These next two are big: sense of achievement and recognition. I mean, recognition across the generations is a key motivator for people, and it is a key ingredient when you're looking at designing your game. How are you going to recognize people? People like recognition, they like status, they want to be acknowledged for their achievements. By tapping into these types of motivations, you're going to be able to solve problems that you haven't been able to solve before with your groups. Very important. And if you kind of boil down a game, so in a game, any game, you learn the rules, right? You hone your skills. So we got to give ourselves permission to have some iterations. We got to give our permission to learn the game. That means we have to give ourselves permission to fail. Now, I'm not talking about colossal failures, but we got to hone our skills, right? And then we got to not give up. I look at my son, and when he plays Call of Duty, he'll get killed in the same spot 15 times, but what does he do every single time? He tries again, and he figures out which sniper he needs to take out so that he can get to the next bunker, right? And he is engaged in that. He's not stopping. I can't get him to do homework. I can't get him to come to dinner. He's got to get to bunker number 12, right? I mean, so how do we harness that in our workforce? We just need to keep trying. We need to give permission to people to keep trying. We're always going to be working towards getting better. Because in a game, in those video games, victory is assured if you play it long enough. Yeah. Right? And you're playing as an individual. Imagine now we play that as a team. We never give up. We're going to reach that goal. It's very powerful to get people motivated.
I want to challenge you again. I want to link this to an earlier challenge. The earlier challenge is, can you think of your staff as going from 8 to 5 to 8 to 5 plus? Here's your next challenge. Can you see your staff feeling this way when engaged in one of your big problems? It seems counterintuitive. It's like, oh my gosh, if we go out and try to get staff to do this, this is not the effect that we think is going to happen, but it does.
Well, and I'll harken back. Let me go back to an old-time example here. Y2K. Remember Y2K, right? That disaster. I mean, and that, we all thought it was going to be a disaster, but think about how staff mobilized for that, right? You had people staying overnight in state buildings to make sure that nothing went wrong. It was a big, big deal. People were really motivated to solve that problem, right? I mean, that we're talking about that kind of energy that we want to bring more into the workplace.
I think we've given you enough. I've got, we loaded a bunch of other examples, and I also had some data to sort of pound into you as to how much the public sector, what our customers think about us, what our staff are thinking, what leadership. I'm going to close your eyes for a second. I'm going to blow through about 7 slides here. Don't look, but I want to come to the game elements, because I think we've done a pretty good job of making a case that there's something here for you to explore, and others have already done it. So close your eyes. Are their eyes closed, Melissa?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Every game has these elements. I don't care if it's a card game, I don't care what it is, but this is what's needed in every particular game. And the first one is purpose. And the purpose, the way that we set the game up is that a purpose, we've got 3 masters to serve. Customer sat, our customers, employees, and their level of engagement, and then I'll just call it the organization, or you can call it organization and management leadership. But there are key measures, and if you jump to goals, whatever those measures are, we don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. We typically challenge our teams to, we'll pick one, but we're looking for a 33% improvement in that particular measure. That's a lot. 33%, but it's engaging enough, and again, this isn't a lot of training, but once the game gets set up, it's actually encouraging. It's not some silly project, but hey, we're really actually going after a big one. The strategy itself, what's needed is the teams have to have the data they need, so we have to get them all the data, and sometimes that's where we start as a team, is we don't have all the data we need, so we go out into the pipe and we get the data we need, or we might have to go to the customer base to get the data we need, or we might have to go upstairs and get the data we need. Sometimes, by the way, the data upstairs doesn't always sit with us down in the pipe. Something to think about. We need an executive player, and this is a coach and a sponsor as well. We need to capture the value stream typically. We need to capture the sub-processes, that's part of it. We need to put a solution in place. And then we need to do something that's really important. Now we got to nail it down. And this is what we don't do. And there's nothing worse than achieving something, you walk away, and 6 months later, because it hasn't been maintained. Maintained could be changing processes, procedures, training, et cetera. It will revert back to 0. So we got to nail it down, and so that needs to be part of it. What do we need to change? The structure itself, again, we've already said that we like to set the game up that all solutions will be accomplished within a 3 to 6 month period, and there's no budget to it. Now the teams might come back and say, hey, we need $4,000, or we need this, or we need that. Fine, let them come back with that if they need it. But once they know that that's a limitation, then they're able to get to it. The roles and responsibilities, everybody, this is new for everybody, so everybody gets trained. Don't think, oh, good, come train my staff to do this. You need to be trained as well. The definitions need to be standardized, and there are a set of definitions. We won't go through them here. And then lastly, operating principles. Needs to be data-driven, need to use your training tools, need to meet once a week. Hold on to your hat. The meetings are 20 minutes each. You know, these are only 20-minute meetings. There's work to be done in between. Again, we didn't come here to make you comfortable. We came here to challenge you. Which includes making the changes after the solution is affected.
And making you a little curious, right? So some states have gone beyond curious. The state of Washington has mandated this type of a process. And the state of Iowa, which we've referred to earlier, they've created an office that reports directly to the governor to make sure that this is happening within their state. So the question we really want to leave you with, Jeff, go ahead and advance it. You know, what's the best thing that can happen? Mary Bell challenged us to be a little disruptive. I heard her give us permission to be a little disruptive today and into the future, right? So we're going to take just about 10 seconds here because we're getting close to the end here. Take 10 seconds. From what you've heard today, process that a little bit. What is one thing that you think you can take back from this presentation to be a little disruptive in your department? Just take 10 seconds, write it down. Think about it, just write it down. You know, we call this action planning, right? So one thing from this presentation that intrigues you, that you think you can take back.
Actually, I'll also maybe modify. Mary Bell said that she hopes we go back and we have a conversation back in the workplace. So maybe it's not an action item, and if it's not, then what's the conversation you're going to have? Bring to that to mind. What's the conversation you're going to have at the back end of this particular presentation back at your shop?
Okay, so we've hit you with a lot of information here today. We will have our slides available on our website, so please feel free to download those. We've got our contact information as well. We are doing a fair amount of work in this area, as Jeff has alluded to, a number of different ways that we work with agencies. We'll also be doing a webinar. We have a regular webinar. We do a once-a-month webinar. So if you're interested in some more information, please feel free to contact us, pull down the slides. Any way we can help in this. We're pretty passionate about this idea and about where we can go in the public sector.
Do we have time for a question or two? I'm looking at JD in the back. JD, we have a minute or two? Do we have a minute or two for a question or a comment? I like that attitude. You can either ask a question or you can share the conversation you want to take back with you. So let's just take a couple real quick and then we'll let you get out to your Starbucks or your Candy Crush. You got another level to go. Come on. Yes, please.
Cool.
So far, she said they have a new talent management suite, and they have a badging system associated with that.
Everybody's kind of, oh, not yet, no, wait.
Who's everybody? Everybody is like, no, no, not yet. Who's everybody? Your executives, huh? What a surprise.
You have a counterpart who's using the system, they attach points, and they give prizes.
They have a system, they attach points, prizes, great. I agree, why not? I agree, why not? By the way, I don't want you to think that we don't have leadership in the state of California or the local government that's after this. Lisa Crow at SCO, Greg Williams over at EDD, Brian Steiger, who was at DCA, he's now down in LA County, Robert Schmidt, CIO over at Food and Ag. There are a lot of people out there working this and trying to bring this to our workplace. So I sort of made a crack about the executives. What a surprise. I'll still own that comment, but I want to balance it. There are a lot of executives out there that are looking to get after this, so I hope that we will follow them as well. And obviously GovOps is all about this. They put on this party for us today. Another question, comment right in front?
I think Kathleen has one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you go.
Yes.
She said thank you for that, there's competition. Great, let's beat him to the punch. I like it. I like your attitude. Right in the front.
Do you have any recommendations for books or websites for some specific activities or games we could use?
Those two books, they're on the earlier slide. In terms of games we can use.
Well, yeah, and a word of caution, so the literature is really a little bit heavily based in the tech and in private industry. But there are lots of examples, like the UK, the government of UK did this Idea Street, so take on Wall Street, in terms of getting people to put forth ideas, regular employees, put forth a simple idea, and then have other employees then invest in ideas. I mean, and that comes right out of like Government Technology magazine. So there are some sources, but this Gamify book by Gartner is a really good one to get kind of what are the models, what are the foundation.
JD, did we get one more? Okay, we're getting this one. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you being here. Good luck with this. Get after it.